Training to failure. Do you need to train to failure? So the first part of this is no. No, you don't. You can make progress without training to failure. I think a better question than need to train to failure, though, is should you train to failure? And the answer there is definitely yes. Yes, you should train to failure. But it comes with some context because, one, you shouldn't train to failure all the time. Two, you should only train to failure in certain situations. And three, you should only train to failure on things that are safe to fail on. So let's start off with an example of where you shouldn't train to failure. I would not recommend training to failure on deadlifts. That's a good way for you to blow your back out because your form will start to degrade and then you'll start rounding your back. That's not a good choice. I would not train to failure on cleans. I would not train to failure on snatches. There's a lot of movements I would not train to failure on just simply due to the injury factor. There just isn't enough payoff. Like, oh, I'm going to train to failure on deadlifts. That's cool. Chances of you getting injured kind of outweigh what benefit you might gain from that. Things that are really safe to train to failure on. Push-ups. Guess what happens when you fail push-ups? Nothing. You just lay there on the floor. Provided that you're not doing pull-ups off the side of a building, pull-ups are pretty safe to train to failure. You know what happens when you fail? You just put your feet down and walk away. Those are things that are very safe to train to failure. You can go ahead and train pull-ups to failure all you want. I have yet to see anyone get injured training to failure on pull-ups unless it's something weird like someone doing kipping pull-ups and their grip gives out and they fall off the bar. So don't do that. Otherwise, you can train to failure on push-ups and pull-ups and probably won't ever hurt yourself. Machines, oh no, I said the bad word. Everyone's going to freak out. But yes, machines are actually pretty safe to train to failure on. You can go ahead and do leg extensions to failure. You can do hamstring curls to failure. Probably not going to get injured in either one of those. Machines are great for training to failure because what happens when you can't do another leg extension? Nothing. Same thing for a lot of these other upper body machines. They got these machines that you can do these presses on and all kinds of stuff like that, even lat pull downs. What happens when you train to failure on a machine? Nothing. Okay? Squats will be a weird one. I will argue that yes, you can train to failure on squats, but I will put the either you have to have amazing spotters or you have to have a power rack. And additional to that is that you had better be very good at squatting. So this is not something for beginners. Like if you're a very advanced level power lifter or weightlifter and you can maintain your spinal position till your legs are what fails, then go ahead and train squats to failure. If you find that your back gives out before your legs, do not train squats to failure. Okay? So that one's context dependent. It depends on you as an individual. Depends on what equipment you have available. All right? If you have a power rack and a safety bar squats are great. And you can do like Hatfield squats, with the safety bar in your power rack. Training that to failure, that's not a bad choice. That's pretty safe. Obviously, you just come down and let the bar rest on the catches. Safety catches are there for a reason. Use them. I would not recommend that you do, overhead squats to failure. In fact, actually, if anything, your arms will probably give up long before your legs. So, unless I don't know. I'm sure there's some weirdo out there who can hold the bar over their head long enough for their legs to give up. But for the majority of people, you're going to have a harder time with that. Same thing for the back squat. Like if you're doing a high bar back squat, for a lot of people, your back's going to give out long before your legs. Doesn't make a great choice for the majority of people. There are some people who can do squats to failure because their legs give out before their back. It's just context dependent. Okay? So, but I did say that you should train to failure. Right. I have a point for this. You should train to failure so that you know what it's like to hit failure. How do you say, well, I had 2 reps in reserve, or that was an RPE 8, right? If you've never trained to failure. If you don't know what it feels like to hit failure, how do you know when you're stopping 1 or 2 reps short of failure? Oh, I stopped 1 rep short of failure. Did you? Have you ever trained to failure? Do you know what that feels like? So yes, you should, because I think that there's actually a benefit in you training to failure, because now you get an idea of what your body's capable of. You know what it feels like to fail. You know how close you are to failure. That being said, okay, pretending that we've already hit all of these things, you've checked all the boxes, you know what it's like to train to failure, you know how many reps in reserve you have, and you're choosing movements that are relatively safe. You're not trying to do a bench press by yourself with no spotters and no safety catches to failure, right? That would be dumb. Let's talk about, should you train to failure? And the answer is yes, but it should be infrequent. This idea that, I take every set to failure. Bullshit. I see these bodybuilders and they're like, yeah, I do every set to failure, 3 sets of 15. It's like, how the hell did you hit 15 reps on your second and third if you failed? Like, if 15 reps, which is weird in the first place that you would end exactly on, I trained to failure 5, 10s, and 15s. Really? Because when I train to failure, I get weird numbers like 9, 16, 19. So, okay. But, if I train to failure every set, I'm definitely not going to get 15, 15, 15. It's going to look more like 15, 12, 9, 11 maybe, somewhere in there. Okay? But it's not going to look like 15, 15, 15. I did my 5 rep max, okay? And then I trained to failure and did it 2 more times. I'm probably not going to get 5 on the second set or 5 on the third set. So, right. Lots of people claim they train to failure. They don't. Now, back to training to failure, I would save it for your last set. Okay, just as many reps as possible on the last set of some movement. A leg extension is a good choice. Hamstring curl is a good choice, right? Even an overhead press, actually. I think you can safely do overhead presses to failure. Because I've done them to failure. And guess what happens whenever you fail? You just rest the bar on your shoulders and re-rack. Okay? That being said, I think some people who do train to failure do it entirely too often. They're fried all the time. And I don't think that that's smart. And so what I would have you consider here is that training to failure is a lot like maxing out. Because it is. It's max reps instead of just max weight. How often do you want to max out? Once a week? If you try to max out your back squat multiple times a week, you're not going to make great progress unless maybe, some people might because they have some assistance. But for the rest of us, for us mortals, if I max out on a back squat, I'm not going to max out on a back squat 2 days later. It's not going to happen. Like, I won't hit the same number. I mean, I guess I could max out, right? So I max out on Monday and I, squat 365. And then on Wednesday I decided I'm going to max out again. And I'm not going to hit 365 again. Maybe I hit 345 or 335. But I'm not going to hit that 365 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's just not going to happen. So the thing is that if you're going to max out on reps, right, you're training to failure, probably once a week. And I wouldn't recommend you say, I'm going to max out on squats on Monday, and I'm going to max out on leg extensions on Wednesday, and then I'm going to max out on hamstring curls on Friday. No, that's still way too frequent. I'm telling you, pick one movement, one thing, max it out, and once a week as the most frequent that you could. I probably train to failure once in a microcycle. So if that's 4 weeks, there might be one movement I take to failure at the end of that, and then I reset and I adjust my maxes and adjust my weights and adjust everything, and then I start all over again. If you train to failure all the time, I feel like you're going to accumulate too much load. It's just going to be too hard for you to recover from. You're going to break your muscles down. You're going to break your tendons down. Your joints are going to start to hurt. And so I feel like people should be very judicious in how frequently you train to failure. But it certainly does work. And I definitely think it has benefits. And I do believe that it can help you break through a plateau. That being said, I've certainly done months on end where I never trained to failure because it's not necessary, right? So this question of do you need to train to failure? No, especially not in season. Off season, different story. In season, no. Why would you do that to yourself? Like, people need to get an idea here of the difference between in-season training and off-season training. This is just like I've had this discussion before, and people come at me weird because I disagree with Mike Israetel. Oh my God, on maximum recoverable volume. But I would bet money that if I actually sat down and talked to Mike, he'd probably agree with me. In season, your goal should be minimum effective dose. Why? Because you never know if a game is going to go into overtime. You have no idea. I could have a really easy game on Tuesday night and then have a terrible game on Friday night that goes into double overtime. Oh, shit. Your training should be as little as you can get by with in season so that you're recovered, so that you perform for your game. Off season, go ahead and hammer yourself because it's predictable now. I don't have a game that might go into double overtime. My training load and my stress load and all that stuff like that, that's consistent in the off season. In season, who knows? You could have a game where one game you end up sitting on the bench the whole damn game because your coach is pissed off at you, and another game game's on the line, and oh shit, I played penalty kill, right? That was my claim to fame. Everyone loved putting me on penalty kill because I'm stupid and I would sacrifice my body and step in front of the puck. And block shots so the goalie didn't have to stop them. And there were games where we took a lot of penalties. So I got a lot of ice time in those games. Because everyone knows Chad's an idiot. He will dive in front of that puck to prevent the goalie from having to make the save. So, okay. Well, I might get a lot of ice time in that game. I can't count on that every game. Okay, but I should be prepared for it. So it wouldn't make sense for me to fry myself doing squats to failure and then end up having a game where I have tons of ice time, 20 minutes of ice time. That's not going to go well. So you see, there's a difference. You have to plan these things and program these things. You have to take other things into consideration. Should you train to failure? Yes, absolutely. It's a good tool. Do you need to? No. And are there times where you shouldn't? Yes. And so, it's not as simple as just a straightforward yes or no. But you guys can get a gist of what I'm trying to explain here. There's a time and place for it, just like how there's a time and place to use a hammer versus a time and place to use a screwdriver or a saw. Use the right tool at the right time, and you will reap the benefits of it.